How does seller financing work for a seller? Well, welcome back. Now, in this episode, I'll answer your question, how does seller financing work for the seller? So you're going to find this very interesting, and it's really worthwhile to know this because it opens up a whole way for you to make new money. Now, my name is Ted Thomas. I've been involved in this business for about 30 years now. The first 5 years or so, I just was doing investments. Then I became a teacher and a guide and a coach, and then I created lots of products so you can learn how to do this. So I discovered this little-known business was highly profitable. And when I found that out, I got rid of all my other real estate parts of the business, and I just do this. Now, this not only helps your community, but it's going to help you, which is why you're here, and you're going to see some ways to finance, but it's going to help a lot of people. By that I mean it's going to help people that need housing, and I'm going to kind of take you through a step-by-step process here. So kind of follow along with me. So the episode today is, how does the seller financing work for a seller? So as I go through this, I want you to just kind of open up your mind. I'll give you a lot of new information. Now, this is like a gold mine for investors. Why is it a gold mine? Because you're going to make profits when you purchase the property, and you're going to be able to make profits when you sell the property. As I tell my clients, I say, you're going to do the work once, you're going to get paid for 10 years. Do the work once, get paid for 20 years. It's going to be up to you. Now, if you want to add big dollars to the sale, we're going to show you how to do that today. And this is really a way you can collect money for at least a decade. Okay, now once I discovered tax liens and tax deeds, I found out here was where there was great margin and I could make myself a lot of money. So I got involved in this business. I've stayed in it, and I really like it, and you'll like it even more after we finish today. All right, so if you want to start small, you can do that. You want to start big, you can do that. If you want to do it with your investment dollars, or you even want to use your Roth IRA or your 401k, you can do both of those things in this kind of program. So stay with me. I'm going to come right back and give you lots more information. Okay. Now, before I finish this video, I do want to mention that I have a free gift for you, and it will be at the end of the video. I'll also tell you about a couple of mistakes that investors make on a regular basis, and I want you to avoid them because they'll take place at the auction. So today, what my episode is about is seller financing and how does it work for the seller. So if you want to make some money, I'm going to show you a money machine right now. Now, we make a lot of money with the tax defaulted properties, which I'll show you. But if you become a seller, you'll want to learn about this method of financing because it's a way for entrepreneurs and savvy investors to not only after they've gone to a public auction and made money buying, that they're also going to be able to make money on the sale part of it. So you'll see that all that work in the next few minutes. All right, now buyers end up at the tax defaulted auctions, and they buy tax deeds. Now, what they're doing is they're buying properties that are basically being recycled. The local government confiscated the property. It's probably been slightly used and abused, and they want to put it back into the marketplace. Now, as it comes back into the marketplace, it comes in at the right price. This is what you want to know. You buy this property at more than likely 10 or 20 cents on the dollar. In other words, they're going to sell this property for the back taxes or very close to that. Now, what does that mean to you? Well, that means to you that you're going to be able to get properties for 60, 70, 80, I've even seen 90% discounts. In other words, 90% below the tax assessed value. So I'm going to show you what some of my students did. Now, these properties have been auctioned in every county in the United States. There's over 3,000 counties auctioning these properties. And once you learn how to do it, you can do it for the rest of your life. But I have students that are buying properties that are valued at $400,000 and $500,000, and they're buying them with no mortgage. Let me say that again. They're buying the property with no mortgage because a tax auction wipes out the mortgage. It just wipes it out. The mortgage is absolutely gone. So they're buying these properties for 30 cents on the dollar. That means they got a 70% discount on a $400,000 or $500,000 property. Boy, that's the way to do it. So you're going to be able to make yourself significant money there. But today, what we're talking about is how does the seller financing work for a seller? Well, this really works quite well. So at the auction, the auctioneer will give you either a treasurer's deed or it might be a quit claim deed. Now, I said quit claim, Q-U-I-T, not quick meaning fast. Okay, that isn't what you're getting. You're going to get a quit claim deed or a treasurer's deed. Now, that's important to know that because you might have to do other things as a result. All right, the properties are sold mortgage-free 60, 70, 80% discounts are not unusual. This happens all the time at these auctions. Now, how did that property get rid of the auction? Well, here's what happens. The treasurer is given power by the local government, by not only the county, but the legislature of the state, and they're authorized, number one, to levy taxes, to collect taxes, and if they can't collect the taxes, they're authorized to confiscate the property. When they confiscate the property, they knock the mortgage off. The mortgage is wiped out. Now, they don't go out and tear it up. What they do is they just take it off the property records. So when you buy a property with a 70 or 80% discount, you have a significant margin between your purchase price and the value of the property. So there's a huge difference here. So that's the way you want to buy property, buying it 20, 30 cents on the dollar. All right, now, as I say, we're talking about seller financing. So we're going to talk about selling those properties and then selling them using installment sales. Now, the biggest challenge with real estate is getting it financed. Now, the banks are in the business of doing that. The brokers, the title companies, they'll all help you get a bank loan. But what if the market's bad? Well, then people can't get loans. Or what if people don't have a good credit history? For example, the banks are controlling the market. Well, if the bank's controlling the market and you don't have a good FICO score, well, if you don't have a good credit score, you're not going to be able to get a loan. So what are you going to do? Well, what you want to do is you want to find seller financing, because a seller can finance any time they want and for any amount they want. So the truth of the matter really is 25% or more of all the prospective buyers out there need some help with financing. Now, America buys installment sales, washing machines, cars, houses. All right, now if you can sell your house on installment sales, you're not only going to make the profit between the low purchase price and the retail value, you're not only going to make that profit, but now you're going to make profits on the sale itself and be able to get profits on a monthly basis. All right, now substantial profits are made for all investors when they purchase at tax auctions. Now we're going to add to that because the seller is going to finance the property, and when they do, they get a big payday. All right, now who are you going to do business with? Well, if you're doing seller financing, the people probably have some problems, like they just got a divorce. That destroys their credit. All right, they might have just been through a bankruptcy. That's a very difficult situation. They might just be very poor with their how they handle money. But by interviewing them, you find out they got a good job, they got good money, and they can afford it. You can decide to sell and to do the financing to them. That's going to be an experience that's going to be very easy on small properties, and they're going to be very grateful that they even get a loan from you. So they're going to pay it because you can throw them out in a matter of weeks. You're not going to give them a mortgage. We'll teach you about seller financing on another video, but what you need to know is that seller financing really works. So let's take a look and see how this does work. So I have clients, and I'll give you many examples on the lower end and on the high end. All right, you're going to pick what you want, but let's start out where we don't make a big investment and you learn how. So let's call this couple M and S. So M and S, they head over to an auction in Michigan. Now, Michigan is not the garden spot of all the United States, but there's a lot of properties in the $50,000 to $100,000 range. Now that you know that, that opens up a whole marketplace for you. Why? Because there's a lot of people that's all they can afford. Now, the banks don't like to loan on $50,000 property or $100,000. They want to loan on $300,000 and $400,000 so they can get a lot of money out and get a lot of fees for doing that. So the banks like the big properties, the brokers like the big properties, the title company does. So let's take care of some of these little guys. So M&S head over to the auction. They find a property that has a value, round numbers, about $55,000. Now, I don't set the values. The treasurer and the tax assessor set the value. So the value is $55,000. They bought it at auction for under $8,000, but let's use the $8,000. So they paid $8,000 for this property. Now, it was worth $55,000. So what did they do? Well, they wanted to sell it. So they first went and took a look at it, needed a little cleanup, a little touch-up. They invested another $4,000. So now they're in the house $12,000. So we teach them, put a big sign out front, and then advertise your property. Do it on Facebook Marketplace. Do it on Craigslist. Do it on eBay. And always say, installment sales available. So my whole business is predicated on buy low, like they did at $8,000, and sell low. So they put in their ad that they would take installment sales, very important because they have financing, they have seller financing, and what else? Well, they're also going to put in that they don't want market value. So they're going to do that in a different way. They're going to say tax assessed value, $55,000. Must sell, $35,000. Immediately they're going to get buyers. And they did sell. They sold the property, and the new buyer agreed to pay them, round numbers now, I don't have the financial statement, but round numbers, $450 a month. That was going to allow that seller to not only pay the amount to them, but they're also going to get the tax paid. They're also going to get the insurance paid. So they're going to collect $450 a month for the next 10 years. Folks, that's over $50,000 on a $12,000 investment. So let's think it out. They sold the property for $35,000, and they originally paid $12,000 for it. So that means they made a profit of $23,000. So that's not bad. But now the seller wants installment payments. So they're going to get on their $12,000 investment about $450 a month, which is over $50,000. My point is they invested $12,000 and they're going to collect $50,000. What's wrong with that? Now, is that good money? Well, that's about a 40% return every single year. You need to learn a business like that. Now, this has been around and going on for 200 years. So seller financing is important. So seller financing works every time. Now, if you're worried that they don't pay, so what? You still get your house back if they don't pay. If they damaged it, you made good judgment and rented to people that wouldn't damage it. My point is, this is a systematic process. Now, the banks, what do? It's a standard process for them, so they can't mess around with these little houses. They won't mess around with people that have less than stellar credit. So this is a great opportunity for you. You do need to learn how to use Craigslist, not difficult. You do need how to learn eBay. You probably already know all that. You can use Facebook Marketplace. That's where you're going to do your selling. So guess what wasn't involved here? There was no attorney involved. There was no broker involved. Okay, there was no banker involved. As a matter of fact, in this case, I know the banker called and said, we'd like to buy the note that you signed with. They wanted to buy the note that the people had signed. So that's how good the deal was. All right, so my name is Ted Thomas, as you know, but I want you to stay with me for a couple of minutes while I do a couple of questions, and then we'll button it up for this lesson. Wow, why don't people pay their taxes? Well, a lot of people actually buy houses and forget they buy them, believe it or not. So people come from Michigan, I'll use that state again, and they come to Florida in the winter months, and they realize, oh boy, the real estate's not so expensive in Florida. I'm going to buy a house. So they buy a house, but they forget to have the tax bill sent to Michigan. So the tax collector in Florida sends out the bill. Guess what? They don't pay it, and you and I get to buy that property. But there's many reasons people don't pay. Now, if someone is single and they pass away and there's no heirs, in other words, they don't have any children, they don't have any relatives, then that house isn't going to, no one's going to pay the tax. They're going to go to tax auction. So there's a lot of reasons for tax auctions. I just named you a couple. How will you know what you're buying? Well, that's easy. First of all tax auctions are listed in the newspaper. They're going to give you the number and you can go look at it. You should never buy a property that you haven't looked at. So you'll know exactly what you're buying and you can check out the values, and we'll teach you that in the class, how to check it. Everything that we're doing can be done on a computer. All right, so it's time for me to button it up, and before I do that, I promised you I'd tell you about 2 mistakes, okay? Now, these 2 mistakes cause people a lot of problems. What kind of problems? They lose their assets. That means they lose money because they don't pay attention at these auctions. Rule number 1, do not buy anything at auction that you haven't seen. You would not marry, ladies, you would not marry the guy if you hadn't seen him. Don't buy a property that you haven't seen. There might have been a hurricane. There might have been a fire. What if it was in a location next to a chicken farm that really smelled bad in the summer months or whatever? You don't want to be in any of those places. What if there was just a big storm? You don't want to be involved in a property you haven't looked. The other big mistake that people make is they get very excited at the auction, very excited, and so they start bidding and they have no exit strategy. Folks, don't bid on anything that you don't know what you're going to sell it for, because you might bid and bid and bid and keep going up, and you might win the property, but what if you paid more money than it's actually worth or that you could sell it for? So those are the 2 big mistakes I'd like you to avoid. For those of you who'd like to have a free gift, well, I have one for you. It's right below me when I finish. I'm Ted Thomas.